Look, my top rated book on confidence is called The Super You. I'm sending it to you, physical book, free. Go to the link down there. You got it.
DreAllDay.com.
Congratulations on tuning into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, the go-getter energy to go make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Putting all this together, you get the mindset, the method, the podcast known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day. Welcome to the show. Today's topic is how to make your presence felt. How do you make your presence felt? In the world that we're in now, where anyone can, quote unquote, put themselves out there, where everybody's trying to get to a limited number of spots, where maybe there are unlimited spots where anybody can get in, which also makes it harder, paradoxically, because now it's hard for people to choose. It's hard for people to decide what they're going to pay attention to, what they're going to buy, what person are they going to buy into. How do you make your presence felt, make yourself stand out, make yourself unique amongst so many people who may be in the same space, in the same lane, in the same industry, doing the same job, trying to do the exact same thing that you're doing? How do you make your presence felt? That's what we're talking about here today. I remember going to my first, not even my first, but actually every single basketball exposure camp that I went to as a professional player. Those of you who don't know what an exposure camp is, it's basically a job fair for athletes. A place where you get to go and, instead of handing out resumes, show your game, playing your sport in front of decision makers who can help advance or help you start or restart your career in that sport. I don't know if they have exposure camps in other sports. I'm sure they do. But going to basketball exposure camps, I mean, think about it. You got 100, 200, 300 players in there who all are trying to do the same thing. Everybody's trying to get a job playing pro basketball or continue having jobs playing pro ball. Everybody in there can't get a job. Everybody in there is not going to get signed. The scouts and managers in there watching are not going to sign everybody. They're going after a few select. They know who they want. Maybe they're just looking for talent. You got to make yourself stand out while competing against a bunch of other people who are also trying to stand out. It's not as easy as it sounds. Maybe it's as hard as it sounds. Maybe even harder than it sounds. The worst result you could get from going to an exposure camp was not to have a bad performance. It was not to have a bad game or to be missing shots or to have a whole bunch of turnovers. The worst result you could have from going to an exposure camp, in my experience, was to do nothing. Was to not be remembered. Was to not do anything. Kind of like you played, but you didn't try to make any moves. You didn't try to score any points. You didn't make any mistakes. You didn't do anything that could possibly have made you stand out had it worked. You don't understand what I'm saying? Like, I could go to an exposure camp, right, and play and take a whole bunch of shots, just be missing everything. And I end up not getting any traction to my career as a result of going to that camp. Now, that wouldn't be a great outcome. I wouldn't be too happy about that because I didn't get anything out of it. But at the same time, at least I tried. Like, if those shots had went in, I probably would have got a great outcome. The shots just didn't go in. So now I just need to work on my shot. But if I go to a camp and I don't even take a shot, I don't even try to make any moves, I don't grab any rebounds, I don't play any defense, I don't play aggressively at all, then that's even worse because I didn't even position myself to possibly be successful. So today we're talking about how can you position yourself to not blend into the wallpaper. You don't want to fade into the scenery in whatever it is you're doing, whether you're playing basketball, whether you're a business owner, whether you have a product out there, whether you're trying to get your book sold on Amazon. How do you keep yourself from blending into the wallpaper amongst so many other people trying to do the same thing? I remember when I went to my first camp, I remember being on the court in Orlando. This camp called InfoSport, doesn't exist anymore, but they called a timeout after I've been on the court for about 4 or 5 minutes. I hadn't done anything. I'd done a whole bunch of nothing for the first 4 or 5 minutes. But in that timeout, I reminded myself why I was there, what was at stake, and where I was trying to go. And I told myself one thing: Dre, play aggressive and get noticed. So I guess that's two things. Get noticed. You got to do something to make yourself stand out. And I went out there and played a whole lot more aggressively, made some things happen, and the rest became history. But let's get into it here. How to make your presence felt in anything you do in life. Number one, you got to know what's going on. In other words, you got to know the landscape of whatever it is you're stepping into. See, the better that you can observe the scene and see what's happening, the better you can decide before you even go how you can come in and turn that whole situation upside down. How can you make an impact? If you look at see what the game is doing, see what's happening right now, you can see, okay, well, somebody doing this, and people doing that, a whole bunch of people doing this over here, but nobody's doing this thing. I'm capable of doing this thing. I have this skill. I've done this before. I know I can do this pretty well, and nobody else is doing it. There's a void there. There's a vacancy there. I can step in right there, and everybody's going to notice. Everybody's going to pay attention to that. That's going to make my presence felt. So the better that you can observe the game, the better you can kind of notice. You can gauge and see where the opening is. Where is the opportunity in this situation? Now, if you don't know anything, if you're going to a situation blind, maybe you won't have that luxury. Maybe you won't be able to do that. For example, going to an exposure camp, you might go there thinking, hey, I want to play point guard. Then you get there and there are 4 other guys on your team who are under 6 feet tall. You may not get a chance to play point guard. You can't step into that breach because there's no breach. There's no opportunity. There's no vacancy. There's no opening. The better you can look at the situation, maybe you can position yourself. Maybe you could ask the organizers, hey, can you put me on a different team? Because I want to play this position and there's no way I'll be able to do it on this team. And I paid money. You got the right to ask that. All right, just a small example, but understand positioning yourself to best offer what's missing or what's needed or whatever space may be available to be filled. I told you the story how when I was on my first basketball team several episodes ago, 14 years old, the coach named Steve. At the beginning of practices, he told us, hey, I need a scorer. I need a point guard. I need somebody who can shoot. I need a big man who can hold down the paint. I need a garbage man who can grab rebounds and throw his weight around. Anyone who can fulfill any of those 5 roles, you're guaranteed a spot on this roster. He made it clear what spaces need to be filled. The better, but understand in any job you do, any industry you get into, you may not have a person who is, first of all, in control and has the power to do that. Secondly, someone who's going to announce to you, hey, this is exactly what needs to be done. Whoever can do these things is getting the spot, and whoever can't ain't getting the spot. You may not have that luxury. So that means you got to step in and you got to be how Steve was for us and see it yourself. Okay, we need this. This will help. This is going to get attention. I know this is going to provide value to people. So you got to know what's going on. The better you see the scene, the better you can step in and provide exactly what's needed. Reading the 50th Law by 50 Cent and Robert Greene tells the story of 50 after he had gotten shot, the attempt on his life. He was recovering from his wounds and he was bedridden. Right? He just had to stay in bed in the house all day, but he would listen to the radio. And as he listened to the radio, 50 noticed that all the music was very packaged. It was very friendly. It was very sing-songy. Even the gangster rap was soft. Even the gangster rap, it wasn't really real. The stuff that the quote-unquote gangster rappers were saying. And 50 realized something. He said, I've never been a studio gangster. I've never been fake. I've always been real about what I was doing. And I've actually lived this life. And on top of all that, because those are just the things that he knew, right? On top of all that, I just got shot. All right, so nobody could say that I wasn't in the street. I just got shot. It ain't nothing more street than getting shot, at least in rap music. I know that's kind of twisted, but that's the way it was at that time. And those of you listening to rap, you know what I'm talking about. And 50 said, okay, there's an opportunity here. I can take the fact that I got shot and use that to my advantage and fill the breach. There's no real gangsters in gangster rap right now. I can be that real gangster. And we all know what happened with 50 Cent from the time he got shot up until he put his album out and he put a whole bunch of other people on. 50 Cent blew up. He was the biggest thing in rap for a couple years, period. Why? Because he noticed where the empty space was. He didn't go and try to do what he had already been doing. He said, here's an empty space. Here are the tools, the resources that I have that can fill that space. Let me go do that. So the first thing you got to do to make your presence felt is observe. This is not about doing anything, people. Notice this? It's not about going and doing something. This is observing what's happening in the space so you can see where the opportunity is or where the opportunities are. Point number 2 in today's topic is how to make your presence felt. You got to take a risk. You want to make your presence felt, you got to take a risk. When we talk about 50, he said he was going to be that gangster, the real gangster coming back into rap music. He wasn't guaranteed that people were going to buy into it. People might have said, no, we don't want gangster rap. We don't want any more gangsterness. Tupac got killed. Biggie got killed. A bunch of other people got killed. You almost got killed, 50. We don't want any more gangsterness. He didn't know. It wasn't guaranteed that people were going to buy into this. He had to take the risk and put himself out there first. You want to learn more about risk taking? Refer to episodes number 389 and 836 of this podcast. Again, full archive at dreallday.com/podcast about risk taking. You got to do something bold, people. Do something bold that puts you on the line. Be aggressive. Talked about aggression in episode number 742, episode number 420. Again, see that full archive. Listen to these episodes about being bold, about taking risks, about being aggressive. Understand that your fears of the consequences of being bold, of being aggressive, of taking a risk, they are way over exaggerated compared to what actually is going to happen. You do something bold, you take a risk, you get aggressive, whatever you think may happen, whatever adverse action you think may happen because you are a little bit too bold, too out there, you put yourself out there a little bit too much, whatever you think may happen, usually nothing happens. Usually there's no penalty. Usually nothing bad is going to result just because you decided to do something bold, take a risk, and put yourself out there. So this is what you have to do if you want to make your presence felt. Being bold. Why is that a strategy though? Let's think about why that's a strategy. Here's why. Very simple reason. Because most people are afraid of it. Maybe you're afraid. Most people are afraid to be aggressive. They're afraid to stick their necks out. They're afraid to step outside of the box of the person that they've always been. They're afraid to be very aggressive and maybe move some people out of their way in order to achieve their objectives. Most people are afraid to say what's really on their mind, do what they see an opportunity to do not because they don't want to do it, but because they're thinking about what might happen if they do this thing. Who might be mad? Who might be pissed off? How I might get, upgraded by my boss. I might get fired from my job. Why my fans might not like me anymore. Why it just may not work out and somebody on Twitter is going to laugh at me. Everything that you're afraid of happening as a result of a bold action, usually nothing happens at all. But you got to have the heart to put yourself out there knowing that whatever the consequences may be of that action, you'll be able to deal with it. Tim Ferriss has a great exercise called fear setting. If you read the 4-Hour Work Week, he talks about this fear setting. And you have goal setting is fear setting. What are the things you're afraid of? What's the worst possible outcome? How could you recover from it should it happen? Read that book if you want to get more information on that. Point number 3, today's topic is how to make your presence felt in life. Number 3 is you got to create contrast. Create contrast. What's contrast mean? It means the difference between thing A and thing B. You want to separate yourself from everyone else or another person or another team or another product, another service, whatever it is, another idea. You have to create as much contrast as you possibly can. This is what 50 Cent did when he was listening to the radio and he heard gangster rap. Now, 50 was a gangster rapper already, right? And there were gangster rappers out. So where's the contrast, Dre? What are you talking about contrast? The contrast with 50 Cent was he's going to show that he's not just a gangster rapper, but he's a serious gangster rapper. I'm going to rap about things that are really happening in the street. I'm going to rap about things that I really did, things that I've really gone through. And on top of that, nobody can say I wasn't a serious gangster because I got shot. Now, I'm not saying that that's exactly how it works, but he had the proof. All right. Amongst all the quote unquote gangster rappers that was out at the time, he had the proof of, look, I got shot doing this. And he went and made a whole marketing campaign. His whole 50 Cent persona was based around this gangsterness, this stuff that happened in the street. And at least to the casual fan, people watching MTV at the time, that was enough. It was real enough to them, and then they bought into it. So creating contrast means you got to do something that makes you very different, distinct from what everybody else is doing in that space. What separates you from everybody else who may be doing the same thing? Maybe you could do the exact opposite. Maybe you just got to take it a little bit further. Maybe you got to do a little bit less. But there has to be something that you can say clearly, that you can say in a short soundbite that separates you from everybody else who may be doing the exact same thing. Because unless you are the best talent, you got the most talent out of everybody, or you have the most skill out of everyone, or the most resources, it's hard to stand out when you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. All right, you can't stand out if you're just similar to them. They say I'm this, and you say, oh, I'm this too. But what's the difference between you and them? If you can't answer that question, if you're not more talented than them, or more skilled, or have more resources, and it's not obvious, then what makes you stand out? You become a commodity. You see, commodity is, it doesn't matter which one we take, they all pretty much the same. You don't want to be a commodity, because when you're a commodity, your price goes down. You don't have a brand. Nobody remembers you. Nobody asks for you. And then, you don't have any power. You don't have any control because you're a commodity. Nobody actually needs you. They just need a fill in the blank. You happen to be a fill in the blank. If you went away, nobody would notice. Nobody would care. You want to become something that if you weren't there, people are asking where you at. All right, that's the opposite of being a commodity. That's why you create the contrast. Doing the opposite, standing out, making sure there is a clear difference between you and anybody else. Michael Jordan was gearing up for the 1992 NBA Finals. And he said this in one of his videos back in the 90s when they used to put out these Michael Jordan VHS tapes. Some of y'all remember those. One of them was called, I think, Michael Jordan's Playground. Another one was called Come Fly With Me. But Jordan was talking about the 1992 NBA Finals. This Chicago Bulls against the Portland Trailblazers. Now, the Trailblazers star player, now we know Jordan was Jordan. Trailblazers star player was a shooting guard by the name of Clyde Drexler. Now, Jordan and Drexler were about the same size. They played the same position. And they were known at the time as probably the two best players at their position in the NBA. Clyde Drexler is one of the best players in the league. He was on the Dream Team in the 1992 summer that I talked about yesterday with the Dan and Dave. Jordan was on that team as well. He was one of the best players in the world at the time, as well as Michael Jordan. And Jordan said in his VHS tape after the Bulls won that final series was, listen, no disrespect to Clyde if he sees this, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood, even though me and Clyde both have skills, even though me and Clyde are both about 6'6", 6'7", we're both bald-headed, we both can jump really high, I wanted to make sure everyone understood there's a clear difference between Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler. He wanted to create a contrast between himself and Drexler. When they played against the Lakers the year before, he wanted to do it with Magic Johnson. When they played Charles Barkley the year after, Jordan wanted to do it with Charles Barkley. When they played against the Utah Jazz, he wanted to make sure people understood that even though Malone is the man, Malone's great. Malone was on the Dream Team. Barkley was on the Dream Team. Magic was on the Dream Team. These are the top 15 players in the world. Michael Jordan wanted to make sure people understood there's a clear difference between me and that guy. And that was his, at least from Michael's own words, his motivation to go and do these things. Is he wanted to make sure people understood, no, we are not equal. No, we are not the same. We have many similarities. I respect that guy's game, but there's a contrast between me and him. So you got to create the contrast between you and whomever else. It doesn't have to be you do something completely opposite. You just got to make sure somehow, some way, people understand that there's a difference between you and him. Again, Jordan and Drexler were very similar in many ways, but Jordan needed to create that extra separation because he knew that's what people would remember. He knew that's what would make people remember him as opposed to remembering Drexler. Now, of course, winning was a part of that as well. What makes you stand out from what everybody else is doing? Now, when you do this, I want to give you a disclaimer. When you do something to create contrast, to make yourself stand out, you must be two things. You must be, number one, good at it. Because if you make yourself stand out, you're not good at it, then you're just a weirdo in the way. And also, you better be right. When I say right, that means whatever way you decide to create contrast, it better work. It better produce the result you wanted to produce. See, if 50 Cent had came out with the gangster rapping thing and nobody wanted to hear gangster rapping, it wouldn't work. We wouldn't be talking about 50 Cent. Okay, so not only do you have to be different from everyone else, you also got to produce a result. I read this letter from Sam Hinkie. Those of you who don't know who Sam Hinkie is, I wouldn't blame you. Sam was a general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers for several years. He just quit his job in 2016, or it might have been 17. I think it was 16. He was the general manager who started this whole thing in Philly called The Process. I did a whole episode on The Process. Go to DreAllDay.com/podcast. Use the search function in your browser. You can listen to that episode. The Process was about the Sixers. Pretty much, he couldn't say it in so many words, but losing on purpose year after year in order to get great draft picks and eventually have a competitive basketball team. The process worked. Sixers ended up with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, who are two of the top 20 basketball players in the world right now because of that process. And what Sam Hinkie said in his resignation letter was that if you are going to be contrarian, if you're going to do something different than what everybody else did, not only do you have to be different if you want to make a jump ahead of everybody else, you also got to be right. Because if he did the process, it was different. It was definitely different than what anybody else did, but you also got to be right. See, it wasn't just tanking. Many teams were tanking. The Sixers tanked year after year after year on purpose. This was a strategy. It wasn't a one-year thing. This was different, but they also had to be correct. It had to end up producing the type of players that Sam Hinkie claimed it would produce, and they did. They got two of them right, at least. Now, they got another player named Markelle Fultz. We'll see what he ends up being. But you got to be different and you got to be right. So you got to produce an outcome with what you're doing. It has to be effective, because if it's not effective and you're just different, then you're just in the way. Now, you're just a distraction. People are going to get back to the business very soon. So let's recap today's topic: how to make your presence felt in life. Anything you do. Number one, you got to know what's going on. The better you observe the scene, the better you can see where the emptiness is, where the spaces are, where the opportunities are that you can jump into. Number two, take a risk. Do something bold. Do something that is aggressive, that moves other people or obstacles or situations out of your way. Do not be overly concerned with the possible consequences of taking a bold action, because whatever you're concerned with happening probably is not even going to happen. Don't be overly concerned with the consequences. Usually won't be any. Number three, create contrast. Do something that makes you different from anyone else, even if they're doing the exact same thing. That alone could be your motivation to make yourself stand out, because unless you're the best talent or have the most resources or the most skills, just doing the same as everybody else and thinking that you're better is not going to be enough. You got to do something that makes people notice, hey, there's a difference between this and this. And not only do you have to be different, you also got to be correct. You got to be good at what you do, and you must prove that it's effective. Otherwise, you're just in the way. That's how you make your presence felt in life. Now go make it happen. Work on your game. DreAllDay.com.